All right, and here we are. Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the BC Coding stream. And this time we had a little bit of preparation, like it was announced and everything. So I will be interested, curious how many people we will have around today live. And with me, at least one person, Tine, is that correctly pronounced?
Yeah, it is.
Fellow MVP, and he had a whole list of questions prepared for us to talk about Linux development or BC development on Linux. Now, we won't get into Linux development yet.
Yeah. So I was thinking maybe we could start by just explaining how come you responded to answering all of my questions. Because for those of you who haven't seen the X post, I was complaining after another Windows update because my screen was rotated, and I'll have you know that I take my rotation very seriously. And that's when Stefan said, well, what about Linux? What if we talk about what's cool on Linux? So I'm very happy that you agreed to this.
Yeah, I've been poking on social media, I think a few people already, on posts like this where something went wrong again due to Windows updates or Windows in general, then, well, just switch to Linux, you won't have those issues. And I did not have any screen rotation problems, but just the other day, I think I texted you that my Discord stopped working, at least the sound part of it. There was a nice red bar at the top saying that something's wrong and you need to maybe delete cache, and I started Googling and things. And yeah. So stuff also breaks on Linux due to updates, but one day after it worked again due to an update. So.
Yeah, we'll get into that. A few years ago, I was already doing my own exploration to see what would it take if I move my development to macOS. And when I was preparing the questions for you today, it's more or less the same questions. So I think it's very relevant now, not only for the switch to Linux, but also just moving away from Windows. And I'm thinking of starting by first drilling into you. Why did you switch to Linux? What made you switch?
That's a difficult question. It's also some time ago already, so it's hard to remember slowly. I mean, I'm that kind of person that always likes to try new stuff. I think I'm changing my VS Code themes on a monthly basis or something, just to because I get bored of old things. I want to try new things, and this was one thing. I'm not sure if I really got annoyed by anything on Windows that, like, in particular, like this was like something where I just, well, screw it and let's switch over, but more like let's try out if it doesn't work out for me kind of thing. And yeah, I think I never switched back really. Like I never.
So how long has it been?
I think it's like somewhat three years now. And I've started by just installing Linux side by side. I made some space on the hard drive, created a new partition, installed Linux in there, so I could boot up Windows if I need to. And I remember that I picked up a few files from the Windows drive, but not by booting in there, just like navigating to the drive from Linux and copying over a few things. And I might have booted it once after I made that switch. So.
Okay, so you didn't particularly hate anything on Windows, but now after 3 years, what would you say was the best thing after the switch? What do you like about Linux?
I think there are a few things with Linux that are the most important things for me that stand out right now, and one is definitely the possibility to customize. And I think we'll touch on that later as well a little bit, but you can exchange the window manager. So you're running the same system under the hood, but you can exchange, like rip out and put in another UI. And that's like a little bit difficult to explain to somebody who doesn't know how that is with Windows. But yeah, that's one part, and I it feels like it's weak.
We'll get into the performance. I have that as a separate question.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the chat is running really busy, and it's hard to keep up a conversation and read chat messages. So yeah, we might make a break at some point and pick up of some of the questions in the chat. I think that would probably be the best.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay, one more general question before we jump into specific BC topics. You like the perceived speed, you like the window manager, but what do you dislike the most about Linux?
I mean, that has to be the lack of a few programs. Let's put it that way. I feel like I've received that a ton of time already, like layout design, and we'll pick up on that as well. I'm sure you have this in your questions as well, but that's a little bit of an inconvenience that doesn't work. And then apart from that, it's really hard to find anything. I will probably need to think about that for a little longer. I'm sure there are things that I don't like, but
yeah, maybe something pops up.
Maybe.
But actually, that's a good one. Missing programs. One of the questions I had were in general Office 365 tools, things like Word, PowerPoint. Is that fully supported on Linux, or do you have workarounds for that?
No.
How is the Office management?
What you can do is not use Windows Office, but LibreOffice, for example, which can probably do everything that Windows Office or Microsoft Office can.
But does it have Copilot?
But it's different. I don't think it has Copilot, no. Which might be a selling point for some, actually. No, it doesn't have that. But what you can do is run all of those programs in the web version, of course. I know that PowerPoint, for example, has some limitations. I think I've stumbled across that you cannot use the presenter mode in the web version of PowerPoint, and then you can't do layout designing in Word, for example, in the web version. So there are a few limitations when it comes to that. But for my daily things, I'm just using the web versions of all of those. And it's actually good because I have like different logins I need, because as a freelance developer, I have usually accounts at my customers, and I need to switch between those. And to do that, I just use browser profiles, and then I have Office also separated pretty nicely, and Teams and everything, because it's just the browser profile. So I think even if I would switch back to Windows, I would still keep doing it like that with the web versions, because it's just so much easier to switch between the profiles. And
do you then have also used the web versions of Outlook and Teams?
Yes. Outlook, Teams, Excel, everything that if I need it, it's all in the browser.
Are you missing any, or maybe not only missing, but do you have alternatives for programs that are needed for development? What I noted down was Postman, Notepad++. I use Prism a lot. I'm not sure if you still use Prism.
I don't know what Prism is. I tried to Google it before, but
it was. I think most of us knew it from the NAV days.
The
statistical prism.
Yeah. No, I did not use that. I never used that. But yeah, Postman runs natively on Linux. That isn't a problem. Notepad++, I used a lot on Windows actually as like my extended clipboard actually. And I don't miss it anymore. I probably missed it at the beginning a little bit because I was so used to it. But I don't need it anymore. I just use VS Code.
VS Code for everything.
Yes.
Okay, then let's go to VS Code. Main question I have is VS Code has 1 million extensions.
Yes.
In your experience, let's maybe narrow it down. The Waldo spec of extensions. Does everything work there, or have you already noticed that maybe some things wouldn't work?
Let's show you. Switch over the screens. There we go. This is my VS Code, and here are my extensions. Let's close those down a little bit. So I've tried to not have too many installed at the same time. So let's open up this one here. So I have a few disabled, but not because they are not working, but more like something I decided against using them. But for me, the most important ones really are those two, the AZL dev tools and of course the code actions from David Feldhoff. And those work without any issues, like there are no limitations.
So have you even found anything that wouldn't work?
They didn't work at the beginning, I think because of like nobody really tried to use them on Linux or did bug the creators of creating, like adding support for Linux. But after, like they've changed a few things that were necessary, I think, and then they started to work again and no issues.
Okay. Would you even say there are any differences when it comes to VS Code compared to the Windows experience? Like working on AL code, working on projects, when it comes to purely just writing AL code?
I wouldn't say so. There are a few things, of course. I remember that I had the Docker extension installed to manage my local Docker containers. Since my Docker containers are not local anymore on Linux, I'm not using that anymore, for example. Those kind of like management things around coding, but no. Like in terms of developing, writing the code in here, no difference.
We'll get into Docker. I have that as a separate topic.
The chat is really going crazy. I think we might have a look there if there is something we can pick up now or we can put on our list for later.
Okay, let's do it. Let's see if I can include something.
Let's see. Yeah, Arthur mentioned the penguin in the background on your desk. Like a little bit of theme.
It's a puffin, but it looks like a penguin, so I'll take it. RAM architecture. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that because I'm not using that one. And I think there are different limitations to that from what I've heard, from what I've read, but I think that's a little bit beyond scope. I'm going to slot it next to the question I have about Linux distributions.
Yeah. Then we have reports. I think reports we're going to touch about, right?
Yes, reports that you have.
Yeah, Windows VM that we already have. Yeah, Docker is thing. Okay.
I see a question about do you use workspaces in the browser?
Yes. Yeah. Work. I'm not sure what. Like there are different things. I think we can do. Is that workspaces? I don't know how it was.
Maybe you can just show the profiles because I don't even I don't use profiles, and that was.
Yeah, I have like different profiles in here for customers, for the stream, for community things. And this is again, this like I mentioned this before the stream. What we're looking at here right now is a VM. So I'm not sharing my actual environment, like my screens or anything. This is a VM because of resolution things, because of other things, then I can manage it more easily. So I have even more profiles, I think, on my regular PC. And this is something I think every browser by now is capable of doing. And it separates everything for you. Your entire browsing history, your saved logins, your cookies, like everything.
I need to look into that because I'm just using workarounds with incognito browsing, but that doesn't store anything, so it's a pain.
No. Every time you have a secondary, like a second login or anything, like basically every time I have a different Microsoft profile, I'm using different Microsoft login, I'm switching it to a different profile.
What's this browser you're using?
This is Vivaldi. This was a thing I tried and then I got stuck with. So just reading about things, about new things, and then I want to give it a try. But it's basically Chrome under the hood.
And there's also a question in the chat: which color theme is that in VS Code?
Oh yeah, that's a recent change. This is how it's called.
Minimal Kiwi.
Yeah. So
for the past week, I switched to trying out Cursor as my IDE, but it has a completely different color patterns, and I'm still not used to it. I'm debating if I should just switch to the color theme I'm used to, or try it out a little longer, see if it's me.
I touched on Cursor as well, but like didn't have the time to really look into it in more depth at that point in time. Christian said that this is the browser profiles, but he was talking about workspaces. I did disable the workspaces as soon as I started up the browser, so now I'm not using workspaces. I don't know how to enable them again, and I'm also not sure what the benefit of them, like what they do, what they give to me, what I don't have. I'm not that organized myself that I can store sets of tabs and reuse them. I just open them as I need it and close again if they get too much. So.
Okay. I remember from our previous call, you talked about settings actually not being compatible between Windows and Linux due to the paths being different.
Yes, what I see a lot when I clone, for example, the base app repositories to something from Microsoft, then now let's find something. For example, do I have a media? No, I don't have something in here. Do I have? I have. And I'm sure I will find some control add-in in here. I've replaced all of them. No, here we go. This is the problem. Like I see backslashes and I also see sometimes double backslashes. I'm not sure when you need the double backslashes. But that doesn't work on Linux because Linux uses forward slashes very conveniently for any path everywhere. But if you want to have your project compatible with Linux, you can use forward slashes on Windows as well. It works. You can just use forward slashes and you don't need double backslashes or anything. You can just use forward slashes and then it works on Windows and on Linux. That was something I needed to search and replace, regex my way through this entire repository to be able to compile it.
Well, that's something to remember then. Okay, what about the terminal? I know on the Windows side of things, we have PowerShell. On the Windows side of things, we have the terminal, but here you have Bash, right?
Yes.
What's the difference, or what was your experience transitioning into Bash?
I'm not sure if there was that much of a transition because I never really used the terminal on Windows that much, actually. If I use the command line, I usually use PowerShell to do things. And thing about Linux is you can just install PowerShell and start it, and then you get a PowerShell where you can also do like you can install container helper, and use PowerShell just like you would on Windows. So if you're used to PowerShell and you're switching to Linux, just use PowerShell for everything, for most of the things. Well, and then the other things I would still need to Google on Windows probably. So I just continued what I used to do when I needed to do something in the command line. I would just Google it. So there wasn't really a transition.
Then what do you still need Bash for? Like, for which things do you have to go to Bash in Linux?
I usually do like system update with a terminal. There is, like, if you're using, now we're touching a little bit into the like differences what I mentioned before with the window managers. If you use, for example, if you just install Ubuntu like it comes, like it ships, and use all the defaults during the installation, you will get the GNOME window manager, which is basically what you're seeing right here. This is all GNOME, and here you have something, and I on purpose did not install any updates. So you have something like this, which would just like a UI thing. It would also check on login if there are any new updates, and then present you with a list of updates. But I'm not using GNOME on my, yeah, nice, on my main, like my root installation. Oh, there we go. This is how it looks like. And there I need to use the command line because I'm using a very more minimalistic way of like the window manager thing. So then I would just do something like this. And Nala is a thing I installed, which basically handles the upgrades a little bit better for you. And then you get presented with something like this. These are all the packages that need upgrading, and it will present you the old version, new version, and the sizes, and will ask you if you want to continue or not.
But these are all the packages related to the actual OS.
Now, this is everything I've installed. This is OS things, okay. This is installed packages, this is everything. You see, it will also update Ubuntu Desktop, for example, which is a program you can install. I could uninstall the desktop environment, and then I'm left with just a command line, basically. And then you see Wine is installed, Vivaldi is the browser, and code is probably somewhere here as well. Could be that I've updated this before the stream. So this would be a typical task I would prefer to do in the command line. Also in here, because it's just, this is way more convenient, and there you have a history and everything. Like it's a nice thing.
But it does look nice.
Exactly. It's colorful.
So primarily just, let's say, the update or installing packages, but you don't really have to go to Bash that often for your day-to-day use.
No. There are a few things. If you were to Google things, how to do things on Linux in general, then you would probably 90% of the time find command line instructions to do things. And most of the time it's just like compiled into one line of Bash, basically, and you can just paste it in and it does the thing for you. So that would be like, that's also, I think, how, not sure everyone, but probably most people learn when they transition, would be my expectation, because it's just like you want to solve an issue you might have, and then you'll just present it with solutions that involve just doing it in the command line.
One thing that comes to mind, how do... no, let's keep that one for later. I'll go to the big question that was also mentioned multiple times in the chat. Reports. How do you deal with reports on Linux?
Reports is well, let me switch to the... Don't need the screen right now. Reports is a difficult question, and I've tried again and again and again to install the report, how is it called? The report designer on Linux using Wine and things. and it just doesn't work. There is one, I suppose, one piece missing, which isn't implemented into that layer of emulation which Wine does, to map all the system events and everything so it works. And one part missing, so it doesn't, the report designer just doesn't run. And again, also word designing, I did not see any way to do that in the browser version, so I run a Windows VM if I need to do report designing. And I have that Windows VM stripped down to the bare minimum. There is no Defender on there. There is no, I've edited the image, and there are tutorials out there, plenty, how to do that, to really narrow it down. I think it, if you have a Windows 11, and it could be that it's still a Windows 10 VM actually. There are 150 background processes right after install idling around, and I think I've got it down to 50 or 70 or something. So it's very, very minimal footprint, so I can run it a little bit cheaper as a VM on my PC. So I don't have the full-fledged Windows install with all the things, all the upgrade process and everything. So that makes it a little bit easier, and also improves the starting time and everything. So it's not as inconvenient anymore to do that.
So I'll dig a bit more into the virtual machines, but just for the reports, I didn't even realize the fact that you don't have Word as a desktop app. It means that even if we switch all of the reports to Word layouts, you still don't have a way to edit them.
No, I didn't try within a year or something. Could be that that has been changed. But as far as I know, no way. You need to have the on-prem installed. I think I've seen some tutorials how to install Office locally with Wine and everything. It's a very long tutorial. It's very complicated. So I did not try to bother with it too much.
If it's not one bash command, then too long.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm
but
curious,
that was long.
For those in the chat that are on Mac OS, can you edit Word files or Word layouts on Mac? Because Mac does have a desktop app, right?
I think so. Yeah, that would be interesting to know. No, but basically reports, I download the report layout, or I have it in my VS Code basically, and then I just push it into the VM, open it, edit it, save it, and put it back over. Which is, again, command line. There is a tool called, wait a second, I just moved this stream. Focus was still on OBS. Should be good again. SMB client, where you can log into a remote VM basically, or any remote machine, it's just SMB, right? Zamba, the Windows file system thing. And then it's just a put and a get command, and you can just press arrow up to get it again, and it's super quick locally. So another use case for terminal.
Maybe you should just go raw and edit the layouts with the XML directly.
I do sometimes for smaller things because it's quicker. But just if I have a typo or something, but then sometimes it messes up when I forget to upload it again, and then I edit it in the VM again, download again, and then the changes get overwritten. So,
okay. So talking about the virtual machine, reports make sense. You don't have any other way how to actually edit the layout. What else do you use the virtual machine for?
Docker, and that's it.
So Docker and reports.
Yes.
I'm guessing the biggest two questions that everyone had.
Unfortunately, we are not quite there yet. I know there is a project out there. Torben Leith is he looked at how to run Business Central on Linux with Wine just as an experiment thing. And I think he did succeed for development tasks and things. Few endpoints didn't get to work, but it's really it's that tutorial is even longer. And even more complicated, I know he forked the wine project and adjusted it. I have no idea what that even means in terms of how complicated that is. But he did that and he did succeed. So the proof of concept is done, but it's far from usable in a day-to-day task thing. So I think we'll need to wait until Microsoft does put in the effort.
Maybe just your opinion. Do you think Microsoft is going to go that route?
I need to be careful, right? But my personal opinion, I think eventually we'll get there because it's just cheaper. If you're looking now, how many public projects or within the running contingent are running actions on GitHub, where the main action is still Windows because it doesn't work any other way, and they're just so much more expensive. I mean, Microsoft doesn't need to pay licenses for those machines, so it's okay. But yeah, the overhead is definitely there. Are you using ALGo for GitHub?
On some projects, yeah.
Did you switch to the use Ubuntu or use Linux or whatever the settings is? So it uses them for all the other actions, like anything but building?
I didn't try that.
Give that a try. You will notice that the pipelines are running faster. So I think that alone should be a motivation for at least for development tasks. Like maybe they're not going to say, well, it's like for production use, or like if you have your customers running on premise, use a Linux server. I don't think that will happen too soon, but maybe for development, like 7049 will run that you can compile or anything, like with a huge disclaimer. That would be awesome, because I think the .NET Core is running without any limitations as far as I know on Linux, and they switched already most of it, I think, with the server runtime. So I think the efforts are already made to go that direction. Just a matter of time.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the DevOps part would be super cool, because it would be much faster, and then you get really away from having to host agents. I don't know. Linux seems the better choice there.
There was also a comment on on YouTube. The SaaS tenants, yes. And then we are talking about production ready usage, but yes, if they could switch over the entire SaaS infrastructure to Linux, that would probably save money.
The last time I had this conversation with my brother, and he was like, so what would be the benefit of switching? And I did say costs, but he was like, yeah, but Windows machines don't really cost anything to Microsoft. But I do agree with the overhead, especially you mentioned 150 services on a virtual machine. There must be too many on the server side as well.
Yeah, you can have bare minimum Linux installations with just a few megabytes of footprint on the disk. If you strip it down, and I mean, in that context, it would make sense for Microsoft to do that, to strip down a Linux installation to exactly what they need and nothing more to run Business Central. You can't do that with Windows. You can't just rip out everything. I mean, maybe Microsoft can, but on Linux, it's common practice.
We can dream.
We can. Always.
So if you would, I was curious, before you said that there is a BC container helper, if you would try to create a container, basically that process would just error out.
Yes. I never tried, actually. Would be interesting to give that a try. But yeah, a Windows container can't run on Linux. And that's part of the design, how Docker is designed, right? Because it's just mapping the changes compared to the host. And if you run Linux containers on Windows, you're actually running them within a VM. which works because Linux is free. They don't need to license that and anything. But the other way around, it doesn't work because you would need to license your Windows VM to run the Docker containers, and that just doesn't work. So that's why it's not officially within Docker doesn't offer that to you, because then they would need to manage all of that.
But in a sense, that's exactly what you're doing. You have a VM, a licensed VM, and then you're running containers.
Exactly,
inside.
Manually. And just the other day, if anyone's curious, I think if you look at the replies on Blue Sky, there is an interesting conversation. I just learned that you can use SSH to map your ports, to map a local port onto, tunnel them basically through SSH. So I tunneled my development and all the BC ports I need through SSH into my Windows VM, and then I can just do localhost everything. It just goes through SSH into my VM. And that's also pretty convenient.
I saw that discussion, but it was beyond me. What about Code Spaces? You told me that Code Spaces are running on Linux. So
that's right.
Maybe just share more about Code Spaces.
Let me just open up a project. If I could type today. And I think I need to switch the stream. There we go. So my repositories, because I have the not the linter cop, but the template I created for that. Where do I have it? This one. This is ready for Code Spaces. This is set up, and it's basically just you have a .dev container folder with a dev container JSON. It's a little bit bigger. And what you're saying is basically what image you're using. And this is, well, it says Microsoft, but it's a Linux container which is prepared for .NET 8 usage. And then it will boot up, I guess, a VM. I'm not sure what the technology is behind that. Maybe just a Docker container with that image you're selecting here. And then you can specify to install extensions and everything. And it will boot that up in VS Code in the browser for you. You can also connect with local VS Code, of course. And then you're running, you're attaching to that VM. And the thing why this is important and why this fits this conversation is those Code Spaces, they do not work with Windows. It's just Linux. So since we can do development on Linux, we can also do development within Code Spaces. And it's if anyone's interested, it's a pretty nice thing if you need to have an isolated set of an isolated environment for the development. Maybe you need to have you can execute scripts or something before, after creation, whatever. This is really complex. This can be a long configuration file. And if you have a number of developers that need to run those, need to start working on those occasionally, you can just have that config file prepared, and they can just spin that up and get started. And you can, this says dev container. So dev container is a thing which is locally. So if you search for dev container, you can find this one. And it's basically, it picks up the same configuration file. And then you do not need to run the code space on GitHub, but you can also run it as a local Docker container. Same configuration.
If you set it up on GitHub, is it free?
It is. Do you have to pay? I think there are 180 hours a month free. Something I'll need to check, but it's pretty free.
So just what came into mind in SaaS environments, you have that option to click on a field and open the source code and debug it immediately. Could you do that with a workspace? I really don't have to have anything on my local PC to be able to debug a SaaS environment.
You mean that option they've added some of the last releases. This I've never really looked into that. This one?
Attach debug. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could. I'm not sure what happens if you do that. I mean, technology-wise, I would say that could be done with code spaces. Yeah.
That would be cool.
That would indeed
I feel
be
like
cool. Like connect your
your
GitHub account or something, and then just have it create one there, or
yeah, because then you could give the power of debugging finally back to consultants, right? They don't need anything on their PC; they just debug, and maybe from NAV days they still know how to set up a breakpoint and see what's happening.
That would indeed be cool. Oh,
okay.
Seeing potential for tech day sessions here.
Cool. I have one smaller question still here. How do you monitor applications and kill processes on Linux? Because in Windows you have the task manager. How does that process look here?
We find more and more use cases for the terminal. This is, I'm not sure if there are better solutions to that, but that's the one that was good enough for me, and probably one that you really like find if you Google for it. It's this is a program called htop. There's one word, and I can quit out and open it again because maybe it was a little bit fast. So you probably need to install this. I'm not sure if it's by default installed on Ubuntu. So just htop, and then it will open up this view where you have your system health information at the top, the CPU load, memory load, swap memory, and things. And then at the bottom, it's currently sorted by CPU usage. Or you can also just by clicking on it. I'm not sure how that even works in the terminal, how somebody would write a program like this, but you can click on it and change the order, for example. And that's just how you do this. And you can, in the bottom, you have this little bit of a help pane. For example, now if I press F3, I can search. I would search for code. There are many code processes, but let's see. It stopped the search when I got demo. Maybe VS Code. It's always looking for Vivaldi. So, but that's basically how I do this. But I really don't have the problem that I need to kill a process. I know
that's a Windows thing.
in the 3 years now, I might have killed a process 2 times. Something. So
I killed 3 today.
Yeah, that's there we go. There is code, and now I can use F9 to kill this, and it's asking me how I want to kill this. There are apparently different signals to kill a program. I just I don't know what those means, so I just use the one which is highlighted by default, and it probably was just a sub task or something that I just killed.
What about application logs? On Windows, we have, what is it, the event?
The event viewer.
Event viewer. What's the alternative here?
I have no idea. Didn't need it so far.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe if we had, if we could install BC on a Linux, that would be more relevant.
Yes.
For the dev side.
Yes.
Not really. Okay.
Someone
So-
said btop is also an alternative. Let's see if that's installed. And maybe also, if it's not installed, it's not installed. So that's actually a good thing. It's not installed. So what do I do now? Because I do not download an executable from the internet and then double click and click through an install or something to get that installed. I just do what it says me, what it tells me to do. I use apt, which is an install manager. This is the default one for Debian and Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian basically. And I have installed Nala, which is the one which looks good. So I just replace this, type in my password, and then it asked me, is this the one you want? And how much disk space? And I say yes. That's it. Let's have a look at btop.
Ooh.
Which is actually much nicer. Thank you for that.
See, it's good you do streams like that.
Yes. And there we go. Which is also
Okay.
like, clickable. So
The next section I have is, let's say I do want to go with Linux now. How do I get started?
well, you should have some knowledge about how to install a your operating system on your PC. If you never did that before, might be a little bit hard. But if you know how to do that, I would recommend the way I did. If you have some extra space on your disk, use that. If you don't have that, maybe you just get a new disk so you don't need to touch your Windows installation at all. And then you can install a Linux distribution side by side with your with your Windows, sorry. And then it will just go by default into Linux, but you can always, like on boot, choose Windows instead and boot up Windows again. And that way you can just tinker a little bit with it and see how it works for you, and maybe you'll find yourself, like me, not switching back anymore.
How do you move data? Let's say I do want to eventually make the full switch. Is there an easy way to get the data across?
Yes, you can open up the file manager, and I would in terms of distribution, I would probably recommend Ubuntu for beginning, because it's the most user-friendly distribution there is, I think, in my opinion. And then after that, after I was working with Ubuntu for a while, I thought, well, now I switch to Ubuntu to get rid of all the pre-installed stuff that I had on Windows, which Microsoft forces upon me. But Ubuntu has the same thing, basically. There's a company, like a commercial company behind this, that's Canonical, which is developing and doing this, and they also install stuff on your PC if you just use that. So why not use Debian instead? And then I started to switch to Debian, because that's just what Ubuntu is running. Like they're using Debian and then building their stuff on top, so it becomes Ubuntu. So I switched then to Debian, and now I switched to Arch. Yeah, but start with Ubuntu, and then you have the file manager just like this, and you have your drives basically, and you can do other locations. Now this is, as I said, this is a VM, so I just have my computer here. But if you're installing this side by side, you will have the second drive here, and you can just go there and copy stuff over.
Okay.
Like copy paste.
That's fairly easy. I want to continue the discussion about the distribution. Can you explain maybe the idea of distributions? Can you just switch around, take one, replace with different one? Is it more of a process of switching between the distributions? How do you decide which ones are available?
Like there are tons of distributions. And basically, Linux is, as far as I understood, and I'm by far not an expert on those matters. So, as far as I understood, Linux is just like the kernel, the very like inside, which is running, and then any distribution has stuff built on top, like make it easier for users to actually handle this. You can also like compile this on your own. I think there is guides out there where you can just take the sources and compile it yourself and then install it afterwards. And I think like every distribution is trying to do something better than others. And like if you're really interested in what distribution fits best for you, you should probably just read about this. Like go to YouTube and have smarter people explain this to you than I can. Like I think Debian is like the like often seen as the grandfather of Linux distributions. There are tons of variations that are all based on Debian, and Debian is trying to be stable. So you're like it's mostly used, I think, also for like server applications. And scenarios like this where you don't want to have that break at all. And then versus Arch, which I'm running now on my machine, is like more bleeding edge approach. And also like more manual thing, like you want to have your Linux, then just do it like you would like to do it and install everything manually. More work to set it up, but gives you way more freedom to change everything around like you would like to. So, and that way, every distribution has a slightly different approach to do things. I think there is one distribution, for example, where you can have one giant config file which will and you can just feed this into the installer and will do everything for you. So if you keep that config file up to date, you can like go to another PC, just install it on there with just one command, basically, in the config file.
But your suggestion would still be, so if you're new to this, go to Ubuntu and then switch to the next one that might catch your
If you're a little bit more like, then do Debian with GNOME desktop environment. I think that's still a good thing. And also like desktop environments, by the way, you can try, you can switch out anytime. For example, sharing my screen again. If I now log out and go here, I can switch. This is the Ubuntu desktop. I can also use GNOME Classic. And this is the one I use on my main PC as well, i3. Which is a tiling window manager, which means that everything by default is in full screen. I do not move windows around like this. They just open up side by side. So let's see if, yeah, like this. If I open more terminals, then it'll just pop up on the side. I can switch with just a key command to have them all in full screen. And then I have like them side by side like this. I can close again. Now if I would open VS Code, oh, it's on a different pane here. So it moves to the third one, so I can switch between those as well. So different window manager, way less overhead in terms of performance because it's like a little bit smaller. And then they're like different. Like there are also like desktop managers that try to mimic Windows as best as they can, and tons of possibilities. But again, yes, like you said, I do recommend to start with Ubuntu. I saw a comment that Arch is the best for beginners. Oh no, maybe not the best. Okay, then I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. No, Arch definitely not, because it's... I remember that I tried this at the very beginning because I read about it after I investigated a little bit of time to find out what's going on with those different distributions, and I tried and I failed. So.
How do you view the updates, the system updates? Do you update as soon as something's available? Because on Windows, I try to avoid as much as possible.
I update like once a week, I think. And I do not select updates like that. And I don't think this is really a thing on Linux either. You just do like, you just run your updates. Just like I did before with the, let's run it again. Oh, need to change the screen again. There we go. Like this, and then it will fetch for new updates. This is like searching the lists for new updates, and you see no change because like it didn't need to update the available packages and versions. There you see, like we've run this like 30 minutes ago, and it already changed something. There was some release, and then it just gives me what I want to do, and it just asks me if I want to continue. I think I also can install one like single applications at a time. I never had the issue that like the entire environment, like the entire system broke and I needed to revert or anything. The Discord thing, I think in 3 years was the first thing breaking after an update. And this is because I'm running Bleeding Edge right now on Arch.
Do you have to restart the system after an update?
Usually not.
That would be a good argument for myself. I hate shutting off my PC.
Usually
I don't want
not,
to lose the progress.
But also, and I think this, since this is a virtual machine, let's restart. And see how long it takes. Back again.
And that was quick.
And that's a virtual machine. So restarting is really not an issue.
Okay.
But you usually don't have to. Sometimes I had issues with running virtual machines after an upgrade if the kernel was updated. Then I just, like, there are ways more experienced developers would be able to do that, or like admins or something, they're more familiar with Linux, they would restart the services affected and then it would still work. You don't need to restart. For me, it's just more convenient. It's 15 seconds and I have restarted the computer. So.
What about when you don't know how to do things? Is there enough resources, enough support online that it's just as easy Googling about the issues as it is for Windows?
Yes. I think easier. Do you have any example we could try live?
Cool. Let's say one of your drivers is failing. I'm not sure how to.
Never had.
Yeah.
And I think drivers is also a thing maybe a few people would be curious about. If you're using like Ubuntu or Debian or anything like recent, I did not have any issues with any drivers, like any mouses, keyboards, cameras. Works. And we had an old camera for me, and I'm not sure if that's broken or not, which we tried before the stream. That one doesn't work. Could be a driver issue. Usually isn't. So I was checking something before from the script you gave me with the questions. Let's maybe do that. Drive backup. So usually you find a Reddit thread where you have tons of options and very good explanations of how to do things, how to use, like what kind of tools there are, which pros and cons. And
okay, so maybe let's touch on this backing up topic. Do you have backups? Do you care about backups? Is it something that needs a third-party app?
It is something you need a third-party app for. I do not think I have backups in place. Also because There isn't anything that ever breaks. Probably I will learn it the hard way at some point, but I think there is, and I was searching for different Linux backup. This was the one I was aiming at, and Timeshift is the one I've looked into before. And this is the repository. You will oftentimes find things like open source for Linux, because Linux open source, and then the tools you're going to use are also open source and very good documented. So this is one tool for backups. It's not for user data. It's for like you can see it as like the system restore points in Windows. You can do with that, and it's fully configurable, and it's as it says, it's aiming. Yeah, here it even says system restore feature in Windows, and the aim is to have it really simple to get started, but very powerful if you really want to dig into it more. And then most people, I think, are recommending rsync for just moving stuff, like backing up user data.
Cool. What about security, like malware? Do you have like an antivirus program running? Is that a thing on Linux?
I don't think it's really a thing. I might get into trouble by saying this, but let's ask Reddit again.
That's a very good example how easy it is to find information on Linux.
This is the one I've seen before. And I'm not sure if, Linux doesn't really, this was 2 years ago. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but they're basically saying here that Linux doesn't have the virus problem because 99% of software you download securely from a signed repository. So you're not going out there in like Googling stuff, just downloading from some shady websites, some executables and trying to install them, because you're just using the packages. And as they're saying, those are signed repositories. There is a process to get the packages in there, and they're like, it's like a little bit more controlled. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What about one more question I had on the list is, most of us probably have corporate PCs. Would this be an issue, side-loading Linux? I don't know, what is it better to... I don't even know how to best frame the question. Should I go to IT departments? Would they even be up for it?
Well, you should definitely not start to try to install Linux on your computer that you got from work on your laptop, because I think you would make some people in the IT department very angry if you even succeed, because maybe there is a BIOS password or something. So no, just don't do that out of like at home start because you have an idea, something. So that should definitely be a thing. You should go there first and ask them. And I think that the problem in our environment is that we're mostly working at Microsoft partners. So there might be a little bit more hesitant, but from my impression from like the general world outside of Microsoft ecosystem, it's very common that especially developers have Linux machines.
Okay, so even though it's best to start with a private PC
yes.
to play around with this.
Yes, and I mean, you probably can do a VM if you really would like to, like just on the PC run a VM Linux, because that's like not really disturbing for the environment, like for the work environment or anything, for the IT or anything. You're just running it in a VM, right? So if you really want to, then you probably could do something like that. But maybe thing with stuff that's falling down. Maybe the IT department would be open to like giving you a separate like device that's configured. Maybe they have a plan for that, especially in the bigger companies that's not only doing Microsoft stuff. I could totally imagine that this is a feasible solution.
I'm going to come back to the question that was asked in the chat at the beginning. And I'm not sure if you know the answer. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. But I would assume there are also ARM supported distributions of Linux. Because what I'm trying to aim at is I have a MacBook that I use for personal use cases. And could I dual boot Linux on a Mac machine?
Yeah, Debian has an RAM version apparently. So let's see, Ubuntu RAM. Oh, there we go.
Everything's available.
So I would say that works. I'm not sure if there are any limitations to the like the application availability or anything, because I really like I have never read up or touched on this, so I'm not sure. Let's server for AM. Let's
see in the chat that
apparently
they work great.
Yeah. So yeah, apparently lots of distros with RM builds work great on MacBooks. There you have your answer. I never tried, I never needed to, but
it's worked for you. Okay. I got through my big list of questions. I'm not sure, maybe there's something else in the chat.
I've seen some, or I have had some questions about the general speed. And I mean, if you're following my streams, I always stream using a VM running on my PC, running VS Code and everything. So for the speed measurements, that's how it is. And I feel like I do not really have the comparison anymore, but I feel like it's definitely not slower doing BC development on Linux. There were some flaws at the beginning where extensions were not supported, where did not support Linux, where Microsoft also did not support it. I had a patcher extension at the beginning that would patch your source code to use .NET instead of running the executables directly. But that's not needed anymore. Native support is there. So yeah, I invite everyone to try it.
That's slower. Everything that I could think of seems to work on Linux.
Yeah, that's what I have here is not the biggest project. That's the Sentinel project. So not that many objects, not that much code. But it compiles instantly. I have all the rules. Lintercop works.
I really want to try a comparison. I need to really sideload Linux on one of my machines and compare the speeds, because I could see Linux being faster. Not particularly from what you said. There's not so many background processes running compared to what you get on Windows. So I'm curious about it.
Yeah, let's open up that btop again. So I have the project loaded. I have PC in the cloud open, and let's see if I have my total memory usage, 3.7 gigabytes.
It's not a lot.
If that helps anyone. I feel like Windows sometimes using 2 or 3 gigabytes in idle.
Let me check how much I have right now. Okay, this is not a fair comparison. I have all sorts of projects loaded up, but I'm using wait, where do I have to go? 37.5 gigabytes of RAM.
How much?
37.5.
Oh my god. I'm just opening up htop on my main PC. I'm not going to share that, but there I'm using 14 gigs. And I'm doing the entire streaming. I'm running the VM. OBS is running. Browser, I think 3 times or something. So, yeah.
Well, I can't. I don't think it's a fair comparison because I do have quite a couple of VS Code opened with base apps, and I have Prism loaded with huge projects. But I still imagine that the number would be significantly lower if I had if this was on Linux.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. There was just a question in the chat. I'm planning on writing a guide for setting up Windows VM with BC Docker on Linux. I'm not sure if I haven't done so already. I will need to check my blog posts, but yeah, I mean, I can totally do that. It's it might not be a guide, but more like doing it live on stream. The from A to Z run through. That's usually what I like more. But yeah, if there is an interest, I can totally do that.
Right. Okay. Do you have anything else to cover, or did we bring it to the end?
I think that's it. I mean, we can do a sum up. Maybe some folks weren't there at the beginning. Linux, like BC development on Linux, is absolutely possible. I'm doing it for 3 years now. Not only BC development, but just like my main system. I don't have a native Windows installation anymore on my PC. Everything I need to use Windows for, which is report designing and running BC Docker containers, is done in a VM, in a Windows VM. I start on demand, and then yeah.
And I think everything else was about Linux can do everything Windows can. Use Ubuntu as a starting point and explore, see if it works for you.
Exactly.
Good. Then I would say thank you very much for agreeing to this. I think I've got a better view of, well, not a better view, but maybe less fears about what the switch would mean.
It's something you need to get used to, but that's for everything, right? So yeah, if you switch to something else, like you mentioned cursor before, if you're switching from VS Code to cursor, although it's the same base, it's still different, and you need to get used to, and it's a learning curve at the beginning. It was a change to a learning curve to switch from nav to BC development, from CL to AL development. So it's always uncomfortable at the beginning, but eventually you get used to it. And then it's a question if it's better or not, but that's, I think, personal opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I think everyone has to decide for themselves.
All right. Then thank you very much for joining me on this stream. Let's wrap up for today. And maybe we continue this with an episode 2 at some point.
The next one could be once Linux is ready for... No, when BC is ready for Linux.
When Linux is ready for BC. All right. Then thank you very much and see you next time.
Bye.